Welcome to the campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we complete our series of programs in which we've been interviewing the candidates for state office. Last week we had one of the candidates for governor of Idaho, and today we have the other candidate. I'm happy to welcome to the program the Honorable Cecil Andrus, who is the former governor of our state. As to background, Mr. Andrus was elected to the state senate in Idaho in 1960 at the very young age of 29, and he served 8 years with this distinction in the Idaho State Senate. He was elected governor of Idaho in 1970 and was reelected in 1974. And as a matter of fact, when he was reelected in 1974, it was by the largest margin of anyone in the history of the state of Idaho. While he was governor of Idaho, there was a number of very significant things that took place in our state. First of all, there was a tremendous increase in funding for education at all levels in our state. During his campaign in 1970, he indicated that he'd like to call Highway 95 at that time the Goat Trail, and gave great emphasis to improvement, which resulted in sections that you'll be familiar with, such as the Lewiston grade and the Whitebird Pass, undergoing great amounts of construction. He also submitted to the voters of Idaho a reorganization plan in which the state was reorganized at the executive level with all the departments and agencies to produce more efficiency. Finally, there was a very large increase in employment and jobs that were created during that period of time. In 1976, near the end of the year, he resigned as governor of the state of Idaho to become United States Secretary of Interior, and is the only Idahoan to ever serve in the President's cabinet. Mr. Andrus, we've had you a number of times before, and we welcome you back to our program to be interviewed as the Democratic candidate for governor.
Tony, thank you very much. And to your viewing audience, I extend my greetings and my best wishes, and remind them once again that yes, I am the Democratic candidate for governor, and I would appreciate their support.
As we have been doing each week with all the candidates, we have a series of topics or questions that we'd like to pursue. And in watching your campaign and reading some of the literature and the press statements, it seems to me that the center piece of your campaign this year has been a discussion of the education needs and how that relates to jobs and the creation of jobs and economic growth. So I'd like to ask you as the first question, how do you see the tying together of education and economic development, and as you, I'm sure, interview people who are heads of corporations, what kind of connection do they make, and why do we need to put those two issues together?
Tony, I'm no stranger to this campus or to this program or to this part of the state. Most of the people know my stands on education, but education and economic development are interlocked and cannot be separated, because companies just do not locate in a state that does not have a quality educational system. That it's a basic industrial fact of life. It's no secret that Silicon Valley located around Stanford and the units of the University of California. And it's no accident that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is the area that is experiencing the best growth in economic development now, and it's clustered again around MIT and the Harvards and the outstanding educational institutions. But yeah, I'm no stranger to the industrial side of corporate America, but all of those people have told me, and they will tell you or anyone else, that if we're going to move into your state, we want a quality education system for our children and for your children. So basically, there are many issues in this campaign that are legitimate, but those two, economic development, the revitalization, the creation of jobs, and adequate funding for education, are the two most important issues.
In relation to the question of education, we've seen a lot of figures thrown around as to the needs we have for primary, secondary, and higher education, both four-year and two-year institutions. If you're successful in becoming governor of Idaho again, do you have some idea as to what kind of funding we're looking at, and what is the sum that we're lagging behind, and what kind of sources should we look at to correct the problem?
Well, let me take higher education first and then public education, if I may. The state board very recently identified, as they should have, and was their responsibility, the number one priority, and that's faculty salaries at the universities and colleges and junior colleges here in Idaho. They said that we're looking at an amount in dollars of between 9 and 14 million. 9 million without the CEC and 13 to 14 million with it. I think that the state board has done their job. They've done it well. The problem now lies with the state legislature and the executive branch of government to make the recommendations. I do not think that they're out of line in their recommendations. So you're looking, rounded off, pick a number, 9, 10, 11 million dollars in higher education. But look right here at North Idaho College. Our state support has dwindled away. It used to be 45% state support. Now it's 35% state support. Now who's making up the difference? The property taxpayer and the students. And that's not what education is all about in Idaho. We've got to do a better job there. Now moving, and we can, moving quickly, Tony, to public education, that I have two goals: to bring the teachers' salaries up to the national average over a 3-year period of time. That will cost us about $15 million per year. Then we have the responsibility of undoing the damage that was done last year to the property tax. The legislature did not fund education adequately, so the override levies blossomed around the state, and what it amounted to was a 10+ millions of dollars of property tax increase. We have to take that off so that the public does not continue to have a buildup in the property tax. So that's going to cost about $10 million. It's just the difference between how do you fund it. I say we should fund education at the state level, except for the equalization formula, and leave that property tax alone for the local units of government to use. Then we do have some needs in curriculum changes, equipment, books, supplies, and so forth. That you add that up, and that just about takes care. That and the state employees' salary adjustment for inflation, cost of living, that just about takes care of the money that we have for the coming year as I see it.
Also, with that tie to the economic development and jobs in the state, you've been indicating in some of your statements and speeches that you have some concerns about what we're not doing. I believe you've referred to the commerce development within the department as it relates to the executive branch, and how you would use business and the heads of business to do some recruiting. Would you like to be specific to us of what your plan is in recruiting business?
Let me point out that a little history, if I may, for some of your viewing audience that may not have been here when I was governor from 71 to 77. We had the highest growth rate in the history of our state. We had the highest increase in average per capita income ever. We appropriated more money for education in real dollars than ever before or since. It was a good time. People were working, people had discretionary dollars, and it's very important that we return to those times. But during those days, we aggressively sought out these businesses, Tony, that were looking for a place to locate. A Tupperware company, more business forums, the Hewlett-Packard plant at Boise, Bucyrus Aries in Pocatello, and the list goes on and on. We had the Department of Commerce inside the governor's office where it had strength, visibility, and money. 2 years ago, they created a separate Department of Commerce. It has a door, has a name on the door, and that's about all. No money, nothing. We are the 50th of 50 states in the amount of effort that we put forth in economic development. You're going to have to put life, fire into that dragon, if you will, and I'm going to use the private sector. We have a business community that statewide that is outstanding with successful members of the business community. I'm going to use them. I'm going to use their employees that travel around the world. Keep in mind, at the Spokane Air Terminal, at the Boise Air Terminal, Idaho Falls Air Terminal, every Monday morning there are hundreds of Idahoans that get on those airplanes and they take off like a covey of quail. Every section of the world. And I'm going to give each one of them an ambassador's job to help sell Idaho. But we do have to make an investment.
Another area I'd like to get into, of course, it ties to the economic question or picture. North Idaho has been economically depressed, and part of that is due certainly to the fact that there are certain national economic trends and international trends that have affected some of our industries in a very, very harsh way. I'm speaking of the mining industry and the forest industry. And it has to do with, as I understand it, some policies concerning international trade and how we will relate to our partners in economics, as well as some depressed national, international prices. As the candidate for governor, someone that certainly would have to deal with that as an important part of our economy, what do you propose that needs to be done nationally, internationally, that will bring life back to the forest and mining industries?
Well, let me say, you and I have been talking about the previous 5 or 10 minutes about economic development bringing other industries in, and we need to do that. But the fastest way to stimulate the economy is to put our existing people back to work. Those people that are unemployed or underemployed that are able to go back to work. Now, in the timber industry, I truly believe that the countervailing duty should be imposed. I think that it will go into effect today or tomorrow. I certainly hope so. That gives us light at the end of the tunnel for the forestry and lumber industry. I see that as an answer to a part of our problems there. But in mining, we have 4,000 miners in the Coeur d'Alenes that would go back underground tomorrow if those mines were open. And those mines can't open until you get the price of silver up around $7.50. Now, a Sarco, Fred Owsley's mine, and a few of them, it doesn't take quite that much. They've got a better record of costs. But for the industry average, you're looking at about $7.50 an ounce to get them back underground and working. Now, that would mean $1.50 above market. The reason our market is down is because Peru, Mexico, and Canada are dumping silver into the world market at any account to get the hard dollar. As a matter of fact, see, we use about 3 times the amount of silver that we produce. So I'm saying that I do not want to see our people become unemployed in order to put people to work in Peru and Mexico. I do not want to see our standard of living reduced for our workers in order to bring the standard of living up for foreign workers. I'm running for governor of the state of Idaho. I have a responsibility to you and the rest of our citizens here, not to those citizens in other countries. I am sympathetic to and I will support them in their opportunity to improve their standard of living, but not at the cost of ours. You know, if we use our domestic supply of silver, we still have to buy on the world market 90 million ounces. That's 2/3 of what we consume. Why shouldn't our own industry have a legitimate shot at fair trade? These other countries are subsidized. Our mines will stay down, will fill with water, and we will lose an industry if we're not careful. And I say that the federal government has to either impose a quota system, get a voluntary commitment from the other companies, or slap on a countervailing duty on silver in order to put our people back to work. Now, I believe in free trade, but it has to be fair trade. So as far as timber and mining, we've got plenty of raw materials for supply in the timber industry, and I see market coming back there. Silver, we need to let the American miners go back to work.
I should point out to our viewers that you made a prediction what's going to happen, and we tape this on October the 15th, and by the time it airs, some days might have passed from that development. And only to be fair to you, I should make that point. Another area that seems to always come to the forefront in each campaign in Idaho every 2 years, particularly for the members of Congress that are running, and that's a question of the area of wilderness that is still left within our state that's not yet been determined as to its final status. And all those who are involved in the political arena, particularly running for the Congress of the United States and organizations, talk about how many acres that we should place in wilderness that we do not have now. And I believe those figures go all the way from your opponent saying 0, that no more acres should be involved, to some of the environmental groups talking 2 and 3 million acres.
Yeah.
And I know you've had some comments to make concerning if this is going to be resolved. The Congress is involved, our state's involved, and many others. And how would you go about trying to negotiate a resolution of a very long-standing issue?
Tony, you can't negotiate it with political rhetoric in an election year. If I'm elected governor, I can resolve this with working in consort with Senator Jim McClure, I think, fairly easily. But you're right. Everybody's arguing about a number. The numbers are not as important as, 1, getting it resolved, and 2, which acres. Which acres are you looking at to protect for watershed, big game habitat, hunting and fishing, and which acres are commercial forest land? I don't know the magic number, but my opponent has said not 1 more inch. Well, you know, that's a pleasing political speech to a Boise Cascade, who I might add sells saw logs to China. You know, they don't even process them here. But it sounds good to them, but it doesn't do much for the industry or solving the problem. Now, Earth First is a way out alleged environmental organization. I don't even think they're fair to be considered, because they give all true conservationists a bad name. But they say all 9 million acres ought to be wilderness. Well, my opponent, though, is just as radical with his 0 as they are with 9. The federal law says, and we're talking about federal land, not private land, not state land, that, like it or not, the law says that those roadless areas with wilderness characteristics shall be maintained in that manner until the Congress resolves it. Well, what my opponent is saying, Tony, is that all 9 million acres will remain wilderness. Puts him right in bed with the other extremists. Now, I say it has to be resolved. It can be resolved, and it will not be detrimental to the overall timber industry of this state. You know, we will have some additional wilderness. Jim McClure, for example, has identified special places, 526,000. He also says, then we will look at the other areas on a case-by-case basis. I don't quarrel with that. I can solve that problem. The main thing, get it resolved.
Another issue that's so important to Idaho and to Idaho's future and the economy, of course, is the farming of our state. It's a vital part of the economy and jobs, and also obviously farmers are vital to the whole society and our food supply. The farmer has faced some very, very serious consequences in recent years, probably the most severe in the Midwest, but it certainly has reached more and more into Idaho and what is happening. I really have a very broad general question. Mr. Andrus, what do you see causing that problem to worsen, and what could you do as governor, or what can we do at the national level through the Congress to try to address the very, very vital part of this country and its future?
I don't know how much time we have left on your program, but it would take probably 2 hours to go through every facet. Let me try to be brief, yet touch the necessary basis. The sad part of it is our own government has almost destroyed our ability to compete in the foreign marketplace. The insanity of the $200+ billion deficit on an annual basis has caused the strength of the American dollar to rise for all the reasons that any economist or businessman can explain to you. That has put our grain producers at a serious disadvantage with competing nations such as Canada, Australia, Argentina, and so forth. So the grain market overseas has been almost destroyed. That causes our farmers a lot of problems. When wheat is $2.10 a bushel and they've got $3.10 a bushel into it, you know, as it goes out the gate, there's no way you can make it up with volume. But what we need to do is to improve our overseas markets. But ignoring the federal side of it, Idaho can do some things. We've got a lot of farmers. Thank goodness. I don't know the viewing footprint of your station, but it's basically in the northern part of the state. We have fewer farmers in true financial trouble up here than we have down south. But there are about, of the 24,600 farm families in Idaho, there will be about 4,000 of them that will not be farmers 3 years from now. The financial problems are such they can't make it. Now, for those farmers that are in trouble but are salvageable, we need to give them financing to help them remain. If they have a cash flow that'll get them through their operating costs of a year, we can help them with two-tier financing to stay on the farm and be farmers. See, if you lose a farmer, people say, well, he may not have been a good farmer, or well, that's the way it goes. But it's not just the farm families you use. That's tragic enough. But all your small towns start drying up. The grocery store closes, or the drugstore closes, or the little movie theater. Look at all those marquees up and down these little streets that are closed. And then you lose rural America. That's a very, very disastrous loss to a state like Idaho. We can, through the University of Idaho Agricultural Research and Extension Service, we can help them with the creation of domestic crops that can be sold on the domestic market, and you don't have to take that beating of the foreign exchange. There are other things that we can do. The main thing is to help them survive and bring back our markets or create new markets.
In relation to that, I know in the last session of the legislature there was a great discussion over the last 2 years over trying to assist the farmer with loans and how we're going to do that, and there was a very great philosophical disagreement between some members of the legislature and the governor's office over how best to go about guaranteeing the maximum amount of the loans to the farmer. Do you have a position on how you think it would be best for the executive and legislative branches to deal with that?
Well, obviously we cannot pledge the credit of the state to protect those, but I do think the state is a viable entity to seek out from our banks and our farm lending agencies through the federal government dollars that are available to help bring about the two-tier financing. You can also do it with a statutory change to make it possible to use like industrial revenue bond funding for certain aspects of it. The main thing, Tony, is to be willing to help. My opponent in this situation, he said that his answer to it was to give tax forgiveness on interest earned on agricultural loans. Well, that helps a banker or a family member who is loaning his son money to do the farming on. They get tax-free for the interest that's earned on that. But that didn't help the farmer at all. Did not make any more money available. But it cost our general fund $2.3 million. How would you like to have that $2.3 million additional at North Idaho College? Or why not take it and give it to the agricultural research at the University of Idaho to bring in new strains of crops or different varieties or alternate cropping? That's what we have to do. Get down to actually helping the farmer on the ground.
Mr. Andrus, there's another problem that's really received nationwide attention in a most negative way, and it's concerned us all. And of course, we here in North Idaho are the closest to it of anyone, and that is the problem of what's happened on racism and the Aryan nations that has been located in North Idaho. And when the latest episodes that took place in our state, you came out and indicated that one way that might be helpful would be to have a grand jury to investigate. You've been very outspoken in support of the dignity and right of persons. If you become governor of Idaho, what else do you think that should be done to help the citizens of Idaho as they deal with what has become really a national problem?
Well, it's a national problem. It's an embarrassment to us. It's a threat to human life. And that causes people to stay out of the area. For example, Dwayne Hagedorn will have difficulty keeping the Coeur d'Alene full on an occupancy basis if this kind of publicity continues to permeate throughout America. Bob Templin over here at his new resort in Post Falls, he's going to suffer the same consequences. Not only is it a threat and an embarrassment, it is not good for us and it's not good for America. Yes, I have been rather outspoken. And I would say to you that we have laws that protect people, give them the right of free assembly, gives them the right of the freedom of speech. And I'm not saying to ignore our laws, but I am saying that those people who use this neo-Nazi Aryan nation approach to creating an image of supremacy we don't need them in America. Under the laws, what can we do? We have to be very careful. I would say to you that, remember, I wrote that letter to the prosecuting attorney before the bombings, asking for a grand jury, saying, do more. Whatever you're doing, I applaud, but it's not enough. I said it politely. I got back a political letter 4 pages long. Looked like it was written by my opponent's campaign manager. But nevertheless, then came the bombings and the other things. I haven't heard from that U.S. attorney since. I'm just saying to him, and I'm saying to the people of this part of the state, well, all of Idaho, that whatever we're doing is not enough. If I'm elected governor, I will support the statutes that will make it illegal for paramilitary operations and training to take place. I will see that our State Department of Law Enforcement will work with the federal agencies to do whatever is necessary to curtail all illegal activity. And frankly, I would not be above keeping, let's say, very close surveillance upon those people.
Another issue that keeps coming up in the Idaho legislature, has for the last 3 or 4 years, and in a very, very close vote, it's been defeated, and that is whether or not we will become the 50th and last state for licensing of daycare centers to protect children. People can't go into the business until there's certainly certain checks on if they have any background of abuse of children. I know what your position is, but I would like to have the opportunity to talk about what the chances are of doing something about that in the next session.
I think in the next session, with a recommendation from myself, with some of the Flat Earth Society that got defeated in the primary election and in some other areas of the state, some changes that will be made in the fall election, I think that the responsible members of the legislature are ready and willing to come forward and put mandatory daycare licensing uniform applications statewide. It is unbelievable that we are the only state in the nation that does not have daycare licensing. Yet, through no fault of those little children, they spend many, many hours each day in the care of someone else. Now, take a look at how much hair is on my head. Not a great deal. But a barber, before he can touch one hair on a head like mine, has got to have thousands of hours of training and testing and then get a license before he can be a barber to cut my hair. Yet a person can come in and have a daycare license center, take care of little children, maybe be a child abuser, have a history of it, and not even have a check run on them. And I say it's ludicrous. It's going to come to an end.
You've been governor before, and you've had a lot of experience in the executive role and also as Secretary of Interior. If you become governor of Idaho, how do you propose to work with the legislature, which certainly would be at least a majority of the other political party?
Tony, I don't think that's going to be difficult. I served 4 terms in the legislature, 2 terms as governor. I have always worked with coalitions to bring together a resolution of some of our problems. I have never had a veto overridden, and it's a situation where you don't ask the impossible, you be realistic in your requests, and you work with people. Now, there are many responsible members of the Idaho legislature seated on both sides of that political aisle. And what you have to do is to put together a coalition from both sides of the aisle. You know, our problems are not Democrat problems, and our problems are not Republican problems. They're people problems. And what we have to do is to remember that and put people together to solve them. I can do that. I do have the experience, the knowledge to get the job done.
With that, after bringing the program to conclusion, on behalf of the staff, I want to express our appreciation. When you're running for office in Idaho, it's a large state, and I know how busy you are, and you've given us a lot of time today, and we appreciate it very much.
Tony, I appreciate your time and to your viewing audience in the homes throughout Idaho.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today has been Cecil Andrus, the former governor of Idaho, and is now the Democratic candidate for governor in the upcoming election. With this program, we are concluding all of our interviews with the candidates throughout the past few weeks, and I'd like to take this opportunity to urge all of you, regardless of party affiliation or choice, to exercise your constitutional right by voting on Election Day, which is just around the corner. I also want to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we'll discuss what we believe to be an important issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.